Hi, welcome back to the Shane Plays Notes series on White Plume Mountain, updated to 5th edition here in Tales from the Yawning Portal, D&D 5th edition adventure book, which updates 7 classic adventures to 5th edition, and we're having a lot of fun with it. If you're new to this series, basically I just try to kind of recap my previous week's session with my party as I DM them through White Plume Mountain, and I also kind of try to talk a little bit about, what kind of thoughts I have as a DM, a little bit of insight as to how I try to DM. Uh, Occasionally talk about rules points and just scenarios that come up and stuff like that to kind of hopefully help other people get ready to run White Plume Mountain or just DM in general. And the feedback I get, it seems like it is helpful. So I'm really glad to have you along for the ride. If you're a returning viewer, again, thanks. I love all the feedback and engagement that this video series gets. So really enjoy doing it. All right, so last session we had just ended, and they were, I believe it was Area 4 that has the glass globes. Is that Area 4? Let's see here. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, the glass globes room, and some of them had gone in, and some others were hesitating on the outside, and a trap was about to spring. That trap does indeed spring, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. Once we begin the recap. But first, we have the ever popular viewer feedback. So let me throw on my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we will take a look at what there is to see. First of all, Sonic Halo wrote in, and he said, "Glad to hear that my idea for waking up the weapons is still in use. It feels nice to help a fellow DM. Big smile emoji." So what Sonic Halo is talking about is I ended up ruling that Black Razor and Whelm, and more than likely Wave, even though they haven't found Wave yet, cannot be used 100% right off the bat. These are very powerful weapons, and in fact, in the original module and in the setup, I think in the Tales from the Yawning Portal version, you're really supposed to go find the weapons for. You've been hired by somebody else to retrieve the weapons for them. You're supposed to give them the weapons, and then you get some kind of big reward. And I'm like, well, if you would do all that fighting and effort and in one of the most famous and dangerous dungeons in D&D history, you probably want to keep the weapons. So I decided that the weapons and the conquest of the dungeon, if you will, would be the rewards basically, plus whatever loot's already in the dungeon. And I also had to balance that against, like, my party is 6th level, and these are very, very powerful, basically artifact level weapons. I mean, why they're not artifacts, I don't know, because they're basically, there's only one of each, right? There's only one Black Razor, there's only one Whelm, there's only one Wave. They're very powerful. And to me, they seem practically to be artifacts. But anyway, so my party is 6th level. There's 7 of them, so they've been able to do the dungeon pretty well. The vampire gave them a really hard time, but other than that, they really haven't had too much of a trouble with the dungeon. But at the same time, I don't want a 6th level character running around with a fully engaged like Black Razor or Whelm or Wave. So last video I had ruled that the character that got Whelm, right off the bat, it's basically sentient, and it talks to him, and it's a +3/+3 Warhammer, right? +3 to hit, +3 to damage, and I said that's it for now, you know, and I kind of said, the weapons have to wake up. They've been down here for so long, and I said somebody in viewer comments had suggested that, and it was a great idea. Who forget who it was, and it was Sonic Halo. So that's what he's talking about. So thank you, Sonic Halo. It was a great idea, and I think if people are running, because I think White Plume Mountain is designed for 8th level and up, if I remember right. Especially if you just got 4 party members instead of, I think we have 7. So you got to be, in my opinion, you got to be careful about just here. You have Whelm, this super powerful weapon, and I think it's a great balancing way. Just over time, more and more abilities will wake up, and that way they get the thrill and the sense of accomplishment of I have this very cool weapon, but you don't have tremendous game balance issues. So good job there, Sonic Halo. And then he also said, yeah, I feel that the Black Razor stunt will come back in a big way. It'll be fun to see how he handle a mishap of a legendary weapon like that. And he's talking about I'm still like, what? Go watch last video because I'm like, what? Uh, the players sent one lone party member basically off scene. Nobody's actually running that player or that character. Has Black Razor, one of the most powerful and coveted weapons, you know, in D&D, by themselves, hundreds of leagues back to their guild headquarters, with it just wrapped in a bed sheet. And word is getting out that Black Razor has been found. So I'm like, so I've got to deal with that. And I'm leaning, the more I think about it, the more I'm leaning towards calling up the player that's their character, even though they're playing a different character at the moment. They kind of swapped out characters uh, a couple of sessions ago, and doing an over the phone session, or if not, meeting them somewhere, but definitely maybe do it over the phone or do it by Roll20 or something like that, and having an encounter related around that. I'm leaning more and more to that, but that's going to come back up. All right, and then so Sonic Halo, thanks for your comments. And then Mike Fuller said, great job with the videos. I thought you were going to end the session with the door slamming shut, leaving it on a cliffhanger. I so should have. I wanted to, but they had just gotten there, and there was still some hesitation on who's going in and who's going out. And by the book, which you don't always have to stick by the book, it says once it's clear who's going in and who's staying out, the door slam shut. There's no way to prevent the door slamming shut, and there's no way, magical, forceful, there's no way to get that door back open. That's just how the scenario is written. You have to find the key to get it out, to get it open. I so wanted to. If we'd have had like 5 more minutes, we had to wrap the session. Like I said, we played a store and they close at a certain time. We've got to, wrap up and get out and all that. If I would have had like 5 more minutes to let the scene play out a little bit more, I definitely would have. Okay, I would have said, boom, door slam shut, and I started picking myself up and said, see you next week. I love doing that kind of thing, but it just wasn't quite there. But yeah, Mike, you and I think alike. And then I love what you said here, and I do wish I would have done this. I didn't, but I wish I would have. This is a great suggestion. So you see a great opportunity to split the party in all caps by starting the session by slamming the door shut and immediately calling for initiative. And then you have simultaneous rounds with the party inside dealing with the globes and trying to get the door open, and the other party that's left outside, besieged by some wandering monsters. From page 97 on Tales from the Yawning Portal. Fun time. I so wish I would have done that, because one, it'd be more fun. It'd be like this crazy, you're in there, and they're in there trying to smash the globes and find the key and fight possibly other monsters that come out of the globes. And then on the outside, that the other part, their other portion, half or whatever the party is, fighting wandering monsters. I love that. I wish I would have done that. If I run this adventure again, I'm going, and they end up being split like that, I will want to do that. Interestingly enough, though, I do have a random encounter for the party in this session, and that it's the first, I think, random encounter we've had. Even though this wasn't so random, I did use that random encounter table. So fantastic. Makes it more fun. And if you do it that way, you don't have half the party sitting there going, while the people inside the room are dealing with the globes. So great idea, Mike. I really like that a lot. So anyway, that's it this week for viewer feedback. Some weeks we have more than others. Always feel free to leave a thumbs up and a comment on my videos. That engagement helps me out a lot. You'd be surprised how much that helps me with YouTube when they see any form of engagement on the videos. It's tremendous help. So regardless, don't comment just to comment, but I love to receive your comments. If you have something that you want to ask or comment on or whatever. All right, so we'll take off our +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we'll get more into the actual session. All right, so here we go. It's important because it's on paper. All right, so we did the viewer feedback. I want to talk real quick about a house rule. What in the heck is going on with my hair? It's like I got this big. What is that? Is that a spike? Is that like, am I turning into a unicorn? I mean, what is that? Is that a faux hawk? I don't even know. But anyway, all right. I I don't know. I usually don't let my hair grow out these long these days, so it's doing strange things. Okay, my house rule on cover and friendly fire. I wanted to mention that. This was just something that came up during the most recent session, and a lot of times I'll just, oh, I want to make a mention of that, and I'll write stuff down. It's not super, super important to the actual scenario or what happened, but I think it's interesting, and other people might want to hear about it. So here's an example of that kind of thing. And this may even at times have been an official rule. I don't know. I haven't even looked it up. I'm just assuming I'm house ruling this. Cover and ranged attacks. So there's times that come up during combat when you're wanting to do a ranged attack, and the enemy you're wanting to attack is partially in cover by one of your allies, or maybe even another enemy, but you're wanting to attack a specific creature, and it's got half or 1/4 or whatever cover. And normally what I do is just make things simple. If you're trying to do a a sling or ranged magic or throwing a knife or shooting a bow or crossbow or whatever, and another character is in the way of you attacking another creature or character or whatever, I just rule that's half cover. Now, if somebody says, "Are you sure?" and I may okay, well, let's think it up. But usually I just say it's half cover, which is +2 to AC to the creature being attacked. What I rule is if you attack with a ranged attack and you miss within the margin of the cover, you instead hit the creature providing cover. So if that confuses anybody, I'll try to put it this way. Let's say that Bob, the ranger, is trying to take a ranged bow and arrow shot against Phil the goblin, and Sue the cleric is standing right in front of the goblin of Phil. So adding +2 AC to Phil the goblin. Bob the ranger, and let's say that the goblin, let's say the goblin's AC is normally 10. I don't even know. I'm just making that up. I'm not looking, so don't be like, well, the monster manual. I don't know. So because of the half cover bonus, suddenly Phil's AC is 12. Follow me? Normally 10, but Phil the goblin now has 12 because of the half cover from Sue the cleric standing right in front of him in the line of sight, partially from Bob back here. So Bob's like, fling, because he's a ranger, so he's going to hit, right? I mean, it's not a problem. So Bob's character, or Bob's player, rolls an 11. Okay? Which would normally be a hit on Phil at AC of 10, Phil the goblin. But Phil the goblin temporarily has AC 12 because of the cover bonus from Sue the cleric. Now, normally it would just be a miss. It just missed. But it's within the margin, okay, of the cover. Because the cover gives Phil up to AC 12 when Phil the goblin normally has AC 10. So if Bob's player rolls an 11 or a 12, then that's within the margin of the cover being added, and Sue gets hit. That's how I house rule it. Like I said, for these days, for all I know, that could be the rule. I don't know. I've just done it like that forever. So, and that came up in this this last session when they were fighting some whites in a random encounter. Dude was like flinging a knife and got it, boom, right in the dwarven fighter's back. Just knifed him right in the back because of the margin of cover. So, and again, that's a house rule, I believe, but that's how I do it. I think it makes sense. I like that. If a player or a creature is the one providing cover, in my mind, they should get hit under certain circumstances because they're providing cover. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. Now, as far as the actual replay, the blow-by-blow of what happened last time, they were at room 4 with the glass globes. And that's, I went over it a session or two ago. I was like, I don't know if my players are actually going to end up here or not. So I went ahead and went over this room a couple of videos back, but I'll talk about it a little bit again. There are 9 globes arranged in a grid, in a 3x3 grid. And each of these globes is a glass globe that is mirrored so you can't see inside. And they're all hanging from the ceiling by indestructible threads. All right. Let's see. Unbreakable wires are 9 silver glass spheres, each about 2 feet in diameter. Now, each one of these spheres, these glass globes, has a key. Only one of the globes has the correct key, but all of them have a key, false keys, and loot, monsters, fake treasure, all kinds of different stuff in there. And one of them has this, sphere 8 has this ring that talks to the players and is basically intended to create a scenario to bring out sort of the cutthroat and the greed in people. And keep in mind, there are still probably groups and players that play greedy and cutthroat. Back in the day, I think it was more common for players, even though they were on the same team, same party, if you will, they would pickpocket each other, they would argue over loot, and they would, possibly put a party member at a disadvantage so they could get advantage on something. Not the mechanic advantage disadvantage, but would put another character into a bad situation to get them into a good situation. I feel like I remember that was more common, old school, if you will. Not every group was like that, but I think it was more common, especially in a tournament type module where people are trying to get points and stuff like that. If they were at a convention and doing a tournament. So this room is kind of along those lines. It's specifically designed to put people into, I've got to make a choice right now, and if I make a choice, I stand to gain a lot of power from our character. So it's intended to kind of bring that out in the players. So yeah, and in fact, and I'll get into it more here in a moment, but it says basically the situation is a basic loyalty and intelligence test. Will the party members cut each other's throats over the ring? We'll get to the ring here in a moment. Will they be suspicious enough to simply leave it alone? If they take time to think about it, they'll likely realize that the ring must be a hoax. So anyway, there's 9 globes in here in a grid, and there's 3 of the players had come in and were kind of messing around, trying to pulling on them and checking out the threads or those wires and kind of messing around, and 4 party members were outside. And after we started the session, we went a couple of minutes, and it became absolutely clear who was going in and who was staying out. Because there was people who were like, you could tell they were like, what's going on in here? And 3 people went in, 4 stayed out, and at that point, I had the door slammed shut. Bam! And they're like, yeah, there goes. And so they're on the outside and on the inside. They're kind of looking at the door and all this. And I'll tell you what, I just said, guys, let me save you some time. Because they were tugging and pushing and pulling and this and cat. And I said, look, I said, no tools, weapons, and this is by the book. I said, no tools, weapons, or magic available to the adventurers will open the door or prevent it from closing. Only the proper key inserted in the keyhole on the inside of the door will unlock it. And I just said, let me save you some time. That's the deal. Now, I could have role played that out with them, but I mean, they could have. Parties can go off on tangents, man, and they're like, we're trapped. We got to get out of here. They could spend like an hour of real time on this door, and I just felt it was better just to make it clear this door ain't opening. And you're going to have some players, especially these days when players want more sandboxy and like don't push down my creativity and all that, that kind of thing. They're like, well, that's just unfair. That's the scenario. The door's not going to open. It's just the scenario. They're in a dungeon that's been crafted by an incredibly powerful wizard. So just like that frictionless floor room, it's literally frictionless. No friction whatsoever. And they can't figure out how that works. Same thing with this door. It's just shut. Bam! And you can't open it. You can't blast it open. You can't, use spells to crumble the earth underneath it. The door is shut. That's just all there is to it. So, and that's how I would encourage you to DM this. Because the point of this room is to get the key that comes with the fake ring, and the ring makes all these crazy promises, and it's to get, an interesting role-playing situation. So that's the point of this room. Now, if you don't care about how the ring causes the party to behave, uh, then yeah, let them get the door open and get out of there. So, but I would. It's an interesting room. It's not um, critical to the dungeon. You can completely bypass this room, but if they end up in this room, it can be really interesting. So here's the thing: you've got 9 globes, and it says in the book on page 99 of Tales from the Yawning Portal for White Plume Mountain, it lists Sphere 1 through Sphere 9 and what's in each one. Now, each of these spheres has an AC of 13 and 3 hit points. So they're relatively easy to smash open. Good hard crack with a weapon will shatter any of the spheres, dropping its contents, if not caught, into the muck below. Keep in mind, this is one of the rooms that has a foot of the nasty water and the little layer of muck and mud on the bottom of the floor with the waters over on top of. Here's some examples of what's in the spheres. Sphere 1, 3 folded up shadows. Yes, as in the monster shadows. 300 worthless lead pieces and a false key. The shadows aren't visible to magical inspection. Yeah, these spheres, unless otherwise noted, magically looking inside a sphere, such as with a clairvoyant spell or a ring of X-ray vision, will show that it contains some apparent treasure and a key. That's it. I mean, you can't really look inside these spheres, and if you cast detect magic, because it's mirrored, I ruled that if there's something magical inside and it glows, because it's mirrored, you can't see that glow coming out of the sphere. The point is, you've got to break the spheres to find out what's in them. Just like Nancy Pelosi's famous, you got to pass it to find out what's in it statement on the healthcare bill. But anyway, so here's some 3 folded up shadows, a spell scroll of fear, and a false key. Jewelry worth 12,000 gold pieces. Wow. A false key and an angry air elemental. A spell scroll of hold person and a false key. Phony glass jewelry, a false key, and a gray ooze. The ooze fills the entire globe and isn't visible to magical inspection. And then Sphere 9 has gems worth 600 gold pieces and a false key. So it's interesting. Some of these globes, these spheres, have real loot and a key. Some of them have fake loot. 11 worthless glass gems. Phony glass jewelry. So there's some of these spheres are pointless. Some of them are really interesting. A couple of them have monsters. The gray ooze, the air elemental, and the shadows. And then you have the real key, which is in Sphere 8, the actual key in a silver ring. Okay, and another thing, it tells you number the globes 1 through 9 for your own reference. Okay, so it doesn't number them for you. I mean, it just puts them in a grid. And you could just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or make it like the phone dial or something like this. I don't know how well it'll come out. That's how I did mine. Okay, so I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's how I did mine to make it somewhat random, kind of random. All right, so and that was just what I came up with on the spot. And what they decided to do after they said, because this is the back wall and the door out is like up here, and here's the back wall. So they just said, well, we're just going to work our way back. So they went smash, 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 and Sphere 8 is the correct one. So they smashed 5 before they got to the gold or the globe sphere that had the real key to get out. And so they dealt with 5 spheres before they got to that. Now, again, you can't get out of this room without the right key. Now, when they smashed the first one, they smashed, I'm pretty sure had the had the gray ooze in it, and they're like, so they fought the gray ooze and they got the key. And they went up and they tried the key. They were like, yeah, it's a key. And they tried the key and it didn't work. And they were like, oh no. And they started speculating. They're like, every one of these is going to have a key in it, but only one of them is going to be right. And I was like, I didn't say anything, and they were like, yeah, that's probably going to be it. Shane wouldn't do that to us, but that book might. I was just sat there and grinning on the inside. But they were picking up on the thing pretty quick. Now, who was in there? There was a dwarf and two deep gnomes, two Svirfneblum. And how we ended up with two Svirfneblum on one part, I don't know, but that's how it ended up. So I ruled that the dwarf was tall enough to kind of smack the globes, but the Svirfneblum were not. But, I guess if they wanted to use ranged weapons or get up on somebody's shoulder or something like that, they could have done that. But basically, they just had the dwarf smashing, if I remember right. There may have been a couple of times where somebody said, well, I'm going to smash that. And I just went, okay, roll. I didn't pay that much attention to it. But if you want to get picky about it, a small character or whatever probably can't reach up unless they have like a pole arm and smash the globes. But anyway, so they went through those 5. They kept trying key after key after key. They did get some of the phony jewels and stuff like that. They don't realize yet, that they got phony stuff. But they got like the potion of flying. They didn't identify it yet. Just stuff like that. So long story short, they fought the Grey Ooze. They smashed over some other stuff, and then they finally got the correct key. After they kind of worked their way through, and really it worked to their benefit. They had that kind of methodical working their way through it, because they only had to smash 5 out of 9. Where, I guess if you're just going purely random, you could technically end up having to smash everything. But here's what happens when when you smash sphere 8. Okay, the ring and a key fall out. And the ring, and I've read this before, but since this is germane to this session, you may have not seen that video a couple of videos ago. A ring falls out, and it speaks to the characters telepathically. It says, stop before you put me on. I confer the following powers upon my wearer: invisibility, haste, immunity to charms, fly once per day, detect magic, and 1 wish. I also provide the benefits of protection and spell turning. The only drawback is that once a year I permanently eat a small part of your life. I think I changed that to take when I was reading it, but I read it again, I think maybe, and said eat. But anyway, permanently take a small part of your life. I must be warned before I can leave this room. Merely carrying me away is not possible. If ever I am removed from my wearer's finger, however, all my powers are lost. So you must decide right now who will wear me forever. So it's basically saying, I have to be worn out of here in order for you to get my benefits. And if you ever take me off, you lose all the benefits. So you can't change your mind later and say, give it to me later. Whoever, the way the ring is saying, you got to choose right now. And I got to take care of this cat that's scratching at my door. So it's basically, you've got to, it's creating a scenario where there's an incredibly powerful magical item. You have to decide right then who's going to wear it, and it must be worn out of the room. You can't just pocket it and decide later. And then if you ever take it off, you lose the magic. So it's creating a pressure cooker scenario where you got to think, right, who's going to wear it? And then, as we mentioned earlier, the point here is it's like an intelligence and loyalty test. Are people maybe going to show some true colors or discover some greed in themselves they didn't know they had, in order to get that ring. So especially for that wish, okay, wish is very powerful. And of course, they were thinking about that wish. So they were like, there was some discussion among the players. And I also ruled that the people outside the room did not hear the telepathic, voice of the ring. Now, here's some other things. Someone who puts it on, the ring, can cause it to exhibit any of the powers mentioned above, except for the wish, as long as it remains in the room. While it is located here, the ring enables the wearer to produce the indicated spell effects at will except for fly, and it also acts as a ring of spell turning and a ring of protection. Once the ring leaves the area, however, it has no abilities and can't talk. So, if they test it, it works. for the most part. And you're going to think that most people uh, aren't going to use the wish right off the bat. They're going to kind of test this thing. So it stands up to a bit of scrutiny on the players' parts. Is this ring legit? So long story short, people on the outside of the room, uh, didn't hear the telepathic voice or whatever. Even though they got the door open, uh, they were still, the three that were inside were still discussing the ring, and people outside, what are y'all doing? And they're like, nothing, nothing. So there was a little bit of, hanky panky shenanigans in the party, because the three are like, oh, no, 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 nothing, nothing. And so they're looking at this ring, and one of the players that had been left outside was metagaming a little bit and was like, are you going to tell us what happened? So there's a lot of interest in this ring. But anyway, one of the players is a rogue and has a backstory that they were a slave of the Red Wizards of Thay, and they still have that tattoo brand, magical brand that the Red Wizards of Thay give you. Um, and it makes it hard to completely escape the Red Wizards of Thay. And so there was actually a surprising lack of bickering over this ring, and they're basically like, you should take this and use the wish to get rid of that brand, which the player who had the brand was all too happy. Oh yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Took the ring, and that was how it worked, and put it on, and they walked out. So that's how it worked out. Now, I did ask um, the guy. He uh, did use the wish fairly quickly, and just to be a troll, I said, "Man, you need to phrase this thing perfectly." Eventually the party found out what was going on after they got out, and da da da. And so he's like, "I'm going to use this," and you could tell he was hanging on to this thing. And the player who really rallied uh, for him to get the ring was like, "Are you going to use this wish to get rid of that brand? Because that's why we gave it to you." And finally the player's like, "Yeah, okay," because you could tell he was like not wanting to use the wish for that, in my opinion. Um, but he's like, he realized he'd be a big jerk if he didn't, because that's why he got the ring in the first place. So, and he's like, so he's coming up with the wish, and I said, man, you got to phrase this thing exactly, because as all good DMs know, a wish is a perfect opportunity to mess with your players. If they want to live forever, you put them in an endless time loop. If they want um, to inherit, or if they want to be rich, everybody they know dies and they get their money, stuff like that, and in some, their family dies or something like that. So the point is, you can really mess with somebody over wish. So you have to, or you can, and I recommend it, have them phrase it. Flowchart that sucker out. It's like a legal document, subsection this of that, or that, really try to cover your butt with a wish. Now, I knew this wish was fake and wasn't going to happen, but I was like, man, you better really phrase that wish, and because I'm just trying to troll him. And then all the other players were like, man, you really better phrase that wish. So he's, like, oh, okay, here's how I wish it. I was like, are you sure? He's like, well, hold on, and he rephrases it and all that. Now, I knew that for a fact that nothing was going to happen. In fact, I love the fact that Lawrence Schick, who wrote this module, with all, there was a surprising lack of bickering over this ring, but there was still this, oh, this ring's amazing, who should get it? Well, you've got the brand that you want to get rid of, you should do that, and da-da-da-da. And, all the interest of, are y'all going to tell us what happened? Lawrence Schick, the guy who wrote this module, reached 40 years into the future and trolled my party. And Lawrence, I doubt you're ever going to watch this video, but if you do by some chance, kudos and congratulations to you, sir. I'm shaking your hand for literally reaching decades into the future and trolling my party, and also trolling my player who's trying to use the wish, and I in turn trolled him on, you better phrase that thing exactly. So anyway, he finally did the wish, and then it didn't. Nothing happened. There's all this tension and build up, And I said that, well, nothing happens. And he's like, what? He's like, yep, nothing happens. And this poor guy, man, when I was reading out all the abilities from the ring, he was just writing this stuff on his uh, his player sheet. Well, yeah, what is the protection from this? And I'm like, I don't know. You'll just have to find out. It's like, wow, he's just writing. Well, he's the cat who ate the canary. He's grinning. He's loving this thing. And then he got trolled so hard. I shouldn't laugh, but I do. It's a moment made for a DM. So um, anyway, so of course the wish didn't happen. Uh, and then there was, the after the wish didn't work, the player still didn't want to take the ring off. He's like, well, in case I lose the magic, because he's still kind of clinging to that hope that the ring is still magic and just something went wrong. And he's like, well, maybe it fell asleep like the weapons. That's kind of what he's like. It fell asleep, and that's his clinging desperately to hope, his denial that he's living in. So the warlock cast detect magic, and I ruled that the ring didn't glow at all. And then there was some discussion, which is, partially true. They were like, well, maybe the ring only works in the room, but for whatever reason, they didn't go back to check out the room. It's partially true. Now, the way that the adventure is written, it seems like as soon as you leave the room, the ring loses all magical abilities, period. But I guess there's some leeway that, because it says, while it is located here, the ring enables the wearer to produce the indicated spell effects at will. It also acts as a ring of spell turning and a ring of protection. Once the ring leaves the area, however, it no longer has abilities and can't talk. So you can interpret that either way. You can say, well, if you go back into the room, it has some abilities. It never has a wish, and you can never fly with it. But it has the other stuff. But when you're outside of the room, it doesn't. I'm ruling, once you leave the room, boom, it's a dud. It's just a silver ring. By the way, they decided, which really kind of surprised me, that they decided to leave after smashing the 5 globes and not smash the other 4 globes, because they're like, hey, we got this other competing adventurers in the dungeon. I was like, okay. I didn't say this to them, but I was like, well, that's cool, because the whole point of the competing adventurer group showing up was to give them a little of a sense of urgency, so they just didn't lay around the village for days at a time and that kind of thing, and they just like, let's do the dungeon, to give it a little sense of tension and urgency. So even though I knew that the competing group wasn't a problem at this point, they didn't know that. So they said they might come back later. So I thought that was cool. Now, this Red Wizard of Thay brand thing that evidently, if you cast Detect Magic, it glows, and it's an 8th level spell that a Red Wizard can put on you to brand you as their slave, and evidently in some cases it can give you magical abilities and all this stuff. One of my players who's playing a wizard said, well, can I dispel magic on it? And I'm like, I honestly don't know. I did a little bit of research at the table. I didn't put a lot of time into this. And I said, well, what I ultimately landed on, I said, I'm pretty sure you can't get rid of it with just a detect or dispel magic, because the Red Wizards of Thay are a very powerful magic organization, and this is, a high level wizard is putting this brand tattoo mark thing on the slave. So it's not like if you escape, you can't just go to the first, rinky-dink McDonald's magic shop you can find and have somebody cast dispel magic and get rid of it. So I said, unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to assume that. But he was wanting an answer right then, like, how do we get rid of it? I was like, I honestly don't know. So, I was like, I just did I did some quick researching on it at the moment. Now, if you know about these things, please let me know. I've done a little bit of research, and, there is this tattoo / slave brand that they can put on their slaves, but I don't see any information. Now, I did find an older edition said you can't just get rid of it with erase with a capital E. I'm assuming that's a spell, and that sort of thing. But also, it seems like it usually comes with confers magical abilities on the person that has the tattoo and all this stuff. So I did a little research on it, because one, it's part of one of my players' backstories, and then two, another player's like, well, can I help them get rid of it? What I found, definitely indicates that you can't just dispel magic it. Now, this is part of a character's backstory, so what I ultimately did was, I sent out a text. We have a group text for all the players, and I said, hey, I need you to since this is part of your backstory and another character or another player is asking about it, I need you to give me more. I need you to give me more information on this tattoo and this brand, and also, I need your sources. I need your source books and stuff that I can refer to. Um, so here is what they wrote back to me. It was in a novel I read 15 or so years ago, so it might not be canon anymore, if it ever even was. Some of the writers took liberties with the rules in order to write better stories. Well, there you go. So, uh, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about this character, about their backstory. If that brand is going to be such an important part of their backstory, I need more information on it. Um, and I'm not, they're like, oh, it's in a novel. Okay, that's fine. I'm not necessarily saying that's terrible, but if you're a player out there and you don't have an official source of game material for something that could come into play during the game, and you want to make that an important part of your backstory, I would encourage you to talk to your DM about that. And not just say, well, it's part of my, and then the DM's trying to now, okay, now how's this working? Like, I don't know, I read a book like 15 years ago. That puts me into a weird spot. And I'm not going to be somebody's secretary. I'm not somebody, when I'm DMing, I'm not their parent. To a great extent, I'm not the teacher. And I'm definitely not a secretary or a research assistant. So, I'm going to have this character or this player research. And that answer I got by text, even though it's a truthful answer, and I appreciate them being truthful, is not sufficient. So I'm gonna say, well, if you want that to be part of your character's backstory, we need to dig a little bit deeper than that. So anyway, if you out there watching have good insight on the Red Wizards of Thay and their tattoos and their brand, specifically, it's been applied to a slave, and how does that slave get rid of it? I would really appreciate that. So, all right. Moving on. So they left the Glass Globes room, Area 4. They went back. They're making their way back to the Sphinx so they can, go north in the last third of the dungeon they haven't gotten to yet. And on the way back, there's that hallway that has the green slime under the water. And they said, is the green slime still there? And I said, no, it's not still there. I didn't have them probe for it or anything. I mean, they've encountered it twice. They pretty much know where it's at. And they also, we discussed, they noticed that things only seem to reset if they leave the dungeon and come back. And that's just me doing that. That's not the book. That's how I rule the dungeon resets for various reasons that I've gone into on other videos. And it's not just once per day or at dawn. It resets when you leave and come back. Now there's one room, the Golem room, I've ruled has gone faulty and it didn't reset. And I've discussed my reasoning for that in other videos as well. Now they get back to the Sphinx, and they don't need to give the riddle. They don't need to answer a riddle again because they're on the Sphinx's side of the force wall. All they can either go north or they can go northwest back towards the Black Razor section, which they don't have any interest in doing. I'm just saying it splits in three right there. And they get there, and I just had it. So the competing group, the adventure group, is like stymied by the Sphinx's riddle. Like the Sphinx is just sitting there, just looking as bored as it gets, and the adventuring party is on the other side of the force wall, like hasn't gotten into the main part of the dungeon yet, and they just look. They're like, and they're discussing, and a couple of them look disgusted, and they're thinking hard. They can't solve the riddle. I don't even know what riddle they were given. I just played it for laughs, and I made it kind of like the scene in the Fellowship of the Ring when Gandalf is stymied by the riddle at the gates of Moria that says "Speak, friend, and enter." And Gandalf's like, "What password is this?" And he's going through every possible word he can think of, and then it dawns on him, "Oh, I say the Elven word for a friend, right? Or is the Dwarven word? I think the Elven word for friend, and the gates of Moria open up." So once you know it, it's piece of cake. But the part of a riddle is, in hindsight, riddles make all kinds of sense. But if you don't have the answer, they can be really tough. But I just had the competing group mainly for a sense of urgency for the players. I never intended it to be a true threat or competition inside the dungeon. I had a couple of thoughts of, either having them stymied by the Sphinx for kind of comedy, tension breaker, or maybe even having them find, some of the party slaughtered by another monster, like wandering monsters or something like that. I never intended them to be a real threat. They were just to add a sense of kind of urgency and tension and competition to the adventure. And also, it could turn out that they are part of whatever nefarious organization is going to reveal themselves at the end and want to steal all the uh, mighty weapons. Because there are eyes watching all of this that keep, as I mentioned before, that keep an eye on the village, and they know that Black Razor's been found. They don't know that Whelm's been found, but they know that Black Razor's been found, and that party went back in. Even though half the party got killed, they got reinforcements and went back in, and that word's getting out. And there's factions and interest within the Forgotten Realms who are very interested in these. So I do plan on having some sort of big, you know, mustache twiddling villain reveal when they think everything's all said and done. And I'm leaning towards the Zentarum. I'm not positive yet. It's whatever organization is going to intercept Scorch, who's running through the leagues and leagues of Forgotten Realms on their own with Black Razor wrapped in a bed sheet. I still can't get over that. But anyway, so I mainly played this for laughs. The other party sees them coming and they're like, huh? And, the party that I'm DMing is like, nanny, boo boo, kind of like holding up Whelm at them and stuff like that. And this party's like, ah! And so they, they're going on. And then they just went up north. Okay, that middle passageway. And I decided to have a quote unquote random encounter since the group hasn't really had one yet. And they are an element of this dungeon, as was mentioned during viewer feedback. I think Mike Fuller mentioned it. On page 97, well, it starts on 96. The main table's on 97. Every 10 minutes, you're supposed to check for random encounters. Now, I haven't been doing that for time purposes, basically. I have every now and then checked, but not every 10 minutes by any means. And it's never come up that they would have had one. But every 10 minutes, you're supposed to roll a d12, and an encounter occurs on a roll of 1. So there's a 1 in 12 chance. If an encounter is indicated, you roll 1d6 and refer to the table on 97, which you can get a black pudding. You can get 1d4 plus 1 bugbears, 2 gargoyles, 1 invisible stalker. That would be fun. 1d3 ogres, and 1d2 whites. Now, what I did was I basically just said they're going to have a random encounter. There was a couple of reasons for this. One, they hadn't had one yet, and it is supposed to be an element of this dungeon. The other reason is one of my players had to leave unexpectedly towards the beginning of the session because their niece had a blowout with her tire, and they're like, okay, got to go, and they just had to up and go. And it's one of my constant players, one of my good players. They're always there. Well, most of my players are almost always there, so I have to say that. But it was one of my steady players, and I didn't want to get too far down the middle path, which they haven't gone yet, without them being there if possible. So it seemed like a good time to do a random encounter, in which is what I did. So I was trying to have a little bit of fun with a random encounter, which I should have done when the room was split, because some people were inside the door and other people were on the outside. That would have been great. But anyway, so I basically random is I use this table loosely because I said, okay, they're going to have a random encounter. And then I think I rolled a d6 and got whites. But it says 1d2 whites. I just picked 3 whites because of the size of the party and everything. I just said you're going to fight 3 whites. I didn't roll a 1d2, which is basically a 1d6 divided by 2, right? I just said you're going to fight 3 whites. And so they had 3 whites, jump them as they're going up the sloshy tunnel, sloshing through the water. Here comes some whites. They fought the whites. It was fun. It was a fun, just quick encounter. Sometimes quick combats like that can be fun. They had some fun with it. That was the combat where the dwarf got stuck in the back with a knife. And I also had to talk to one of my characters. Again, I try not to intervene too much. I try to let role-playing be role-playing, but it did point out that one of my characters, or one of my players who was a rogue, was standing on the front line with the whites. And the way, the size of the corridor and everything, and due to the speed of the dwarf not being able to run in, fight, and then get back out, because you can go through your allies' grid spaces as long as you don't end there during a turn of combat. Their main tank, their dwarven fighter, couldn't get up to the front lines to fight these whites. And, I was like, look, man, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just pointing out that one of your tank is basically cannot fulfill their core competency right now because they're just sitting in the back fiddling their thumbs. Like they don't want to use ranged weapons because they're afraid to hit somebody, and um, they can't get up there and then fight and then back up, and then finally they said the rogue moved out to give the warrior to be able to get in. Now the rogue was not a terribly bad person to have there because they were doing backstab damage and stuff like that, or sneak attack damage, but there was some darkness, some magical darkness that got into the mix that kept the sneak attack from working. So at that point it made sense for the rogue to back out and the dwarven warrior to come in. And I just want to point this out. Y'all can do what y'all want, but from my perspective, we got a player here who's basically got to twiddle their thumbs. Um, and you will have players like that tend to hog things, and they may not even be thinking about that. They're not thinking about what they're doing to the rest of the party. So, and if they hadn't have changed up, I wouldn't have done anything about it. I mean, that's their choice, but I just wanted to mention that to them. So, they ended at the flooded chamber, area 9, without the party exploring it. So the timing worked out really well that the player who had to leave didn't really miss a lot. They're going to make it back next week when they start basically really exploring this middle path, the last third of the dungeon that leads to Wave. The other thing I wanted to point out was Turn Undead came up. Did some turning on those whites. And I don't know if I've discussed Turn Undead recently for 5th edition in any of my videos. So just as a quick overview of Turn Undead, at 2nd level for a cleric, you gain the ability to channel divine energy directly from your deity, using that energy to fuel magical effects. You start with 2 such effects, Turn Undead, and then an effect determined by your domain. So Turn Undead in 5th edition is under the channel divinity overall power. And then you get, as you go up at 6th level, you get 2 channel divinities for rest. You get 1 channel divinity for rest at 2nd level. Let's see. At 18th level, you get 3 channel divinities for rest. So it's interesting. At 1st level, as a cleric in 5th edition, you can't even turn undead. But there used to be, in like 1st edition and basic and all that, maybe even 2nd edition, there was this whole table of effects you could do on undead versus types. You could turn, you could destroy, you could do all kinds of other stuff, and it was this chart by your level versus the undead type, like from skeletons out to like vampires, right? It was this whole chart. Now it's just it's basically you can turn undead as an action. You present your holy symbol and speak a prayer censoring the dead. So you're like, each undead that can see or hear you within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. So they have to be able to see or hear you within 30 feet. If the creature fails its saving throw, it is turned for 1 minute or until it takes any damage. So, and the saving throw is based on your cleric will have a saving throw for its spells and magical effects built in, that you're supposed to keep up with. Like if they resist my spells, this is the DC they have to beat. A turn creature must spend its turns trying to move as far away from you as it can, and it can't willingly move to a space within 30 feet of you. So it has to run away as far as it can, but it can't willingly get closer than 30 feet. It can't take reactions. For its action, it can only use the dash action or try to escape from an effect that prevents it from moving. If there's nowhere to move, the creature can use the dodge action. So it's either trying to get away or trying not to get hit. It's just scared of you. And then starting at 5th level, when an undead fails its saving throw against your turn undead feature, the creature is instantly destroyed if its challenge rating is at or below a certain threshold, as shown on the Destroy Undead table. And this is on page 58 and 59 in the player's handbook. At 5th level, if the challenge rating for an undead is 1/2 or below, 8th level challenge rating 1, 11th level challenge rating 2, 14th level challenge rating 3, and 17th level challenge rating 4 or lower. So in what these whites were CR3, so you would have to be a 14th level cleric in order to just outright destroy whites when you turn them. So thought that was worth mentioning on the turn undead. And then finally at the end of the session, a couple of players said that was fun at the end of the session, and it's always good to get that kind of feedback. I get that feedback every now and then, not every session, but they're like, well, that was fun. Some sessions are just better than others. And, they were like, oh, that was really fun. So players, if you're having fun, let your DM know, because that encourages them and puts a little wind in their sails and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. That's it for this session. Look forward to any comments or questions you have, but we will definitely catch you next time. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up for a comment, or a comment if you want to. That helps me out tremendously. Maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate that. We broke 1,000 subscribers a few weeks back, and we're steadily going up. Appreciate everybody who watches, and we will catch you next time on Shane Plays.